Welcome to the Connected Mom Podcast, where we have real conversations, helping you to connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. And by the way, we don't do guilt here at the Connected Mom Podcast because we know that you are trying hard as a mama. And we want you to know that God is for you. He is not against you. And so we're going to dive into a conversation today that I'm really excited about. My guest today is a dear friend of mine, Carol McCracken, and she is the director of discipleship at Orange Beach Methodist Church. She is a Christian communicator, a Bible teacher. Get this, she's a wedding planner, which I personally think is cool. And she co-hosts the Your Daily Bible Verse podcast, as well as the Faith Over Fear podcast. And she's just delightful. And today we're going to talk with her about her story, which includes a special needs child and feeling a little bit isolated. So, hey, here's the thing, mamas. If you have a special needs kiddo, would you really lean in and listen? Because I think today's episode is really going to encourage your heart. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, it's so fun to have you on. So, okay, let's start with your story. So tell us your story about the whole thing with parenting.
Well, it's always fun to decide where to begin on this, but my story is a story of redemption when I didn't think it was going to be redemption. And that's why I really want to share it. But my husband and I were married for 8 years before our son came along. And we had 2 really good years with him. He was pretty and everybody loved him. He was the apple of everybody's eye. And suddenly at 2, things began to change. And we thought, okay, terrible twos. They all talked to us about it. But wow, we're really having terrible twos. And this progressed and we didn't know really what to do with it. He ended up getting kicked out of 4 daycares.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, the record. He holds the record. It's like, oh my word. In fact, my mother was watching him one time when my husband and I were traveling, and she and he were looking out the window, and one of those little buses went by, and he goes, "Grandmother, see that?" She's like, "Yes." He goes, "I was thrown out of that one."
I love that.
Oh man. So we had a sense of awareness, but we ended up progressing through his life. We knew we had a really good kindergarten teacher, and the kindergarten teacher was watching him, and she's like, "Have you tested him for ADHD?" And I was offended. I should have figured it out with all of the other caregivers that he couldn't get along with. But you don't want to think about that with your child. They're just not trying enough. It's not my child. But she was very, very loving about it. She's like, "Carol, if you look at him, we have a classroom that's supposed to be stimulating. It's supposed to be encouraging, but he takes his little chair and he turns his back to all the stimulation. And he is self-selecting, I think, and he is screening things out so that he can concentrate." So sure enough, he was ADHD, and she worked with him great. We found out he's a really smart, intelligent child, and we knew he was gifted. And by the time he got to 3rd grade, he went to a special school for gifted children, and they took a picture of him, and he was teaching string theory on the chalkboard to fellow third graders. What do you do with that? How do you parent that? So when puberty hit, we began to have a really tough time. Connor was doing things that even he didn't understand. And we knew, okay, this seems to be way more than ADHD. He was to the point where he was scaring us. And when you love your child deeply, what do you do when he's not like all the rest of the children? And it was scary. So we found a doctor We went through several, and we finally landed on a doctor that had some of the same things that Connor ended up having. And puberty was messing with his hormones, basically, is what we found out. And Connor was diagnosed not only with ADHD, but with Asperger syndrome, with something called cyclothymia, which is a mood disorder, and Tourette's.
Mm-hmm.
All four of these things, and the doctor told us the major thing is that his cyclothymia is going to cause, at any moment in time, without any warning, his chemicals can all drop, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening with him. So it was a long journey. We were brokenhearted. I can just remember weeping with my husband, but yet there was also this sense of relief, because it was like, well, now we know what we're dealing with, at least.
Yeah, yeah. And there are a lot of kids with ADHD, and most often they're very intelligent, you know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The thing with Connor was that he was so smart, but he had no social skills to go along with it. So when he made a decision, it was usually wrong. So we basically were learning a foreign language of how to treat him so that he would be comfortable. And I went from letting all of my hopes and aspirations for him go out the window, because I just wanted him to be happy. What you want for your child, no matter what. But unfortunately, my husband and I kind of disagreed on how we should handle him. We both wanted what was the best for him, but there's no book written on it. What do we do with it? He thought I was too easy on Connor. My husband, I thought he was too hard on him. What do you do? How do you come together? And so we got dysfunctional. There's just no two ways about it. We got dysfunctional because Connor was making decisions, and he shoplifted. He and I don't mean to scare anybody, because it all turns out well, but Rich and I went out to dinner one night. We were remodeling, we were adding on to the house, and we came back, and he had taken a BB gun and shot all the windows out of the house. Why did you do that, my son? Nothing was wrong when we left. Nothing. He kept telling us, I don't know. I don't know. And our wonderful doctor is, he really doesn't know why he did this. So I just didn't want to feel anymore. I just didn't. So I began to drink wine. And let me tell you, to feel numb sometimes instead of waiting for the shoe to drop all the time was preferable for a little while. Only when I wasn't drinking wine anymore, the problems were still there. So it solved nothing. So nobody ever starts out to be an alcoholic, but it's prevalent in my family, and I succumbed to it. I abused alcohol. So, and we don't share those things. We isolate. We don't want to show everybody our dirty laundry. And I'm the Bible study teacher. What would people say?
Yes, yes. So that was complicated. So what happened between you and your husband?
We ended up separating.
Okay. Yeah. And, a lot of times, Carol, when there is a special needs kiddo in the home, there is a lot of friction, and I think so. Yeah, there's the impact on your marriage. And for starters, let's start there. And then I want to talk a little bit about why it's important for mamas of kids that have special needs to find community, But for right now, what would you say to your younger self, in the thick of this? What could you have done different in your marriage during those years?
Instead of sweeping everything under the rug, realize you're not the only one going through issues. They may seem foreign to you, and scary to you, and you may assume that nobody understands. But the power of the Lord can overcome anything. The Lord was with me all the time, but yet you need people to surround you, to help you, to relieve you from your stress a little bit, people to help guide you, other fellow godly women. All of that to say, isolation is the worst thing you can do. You cannot simply power through some things on your own strength.
Yeah, you really can't. I know some families with special needs kiddos, and they really have to depend on their community and they have to, lean in. And that's where that connection with your friends, for those of you that are mamas that have special needs kiddos, you need those closely connected friendships, friends you can call and you can say, hey, I'm about ready to lose it today. Can you come and sit with me for a little bit? Or can you take my child on a car ride? Or can you, I don't know, bring me groceries because I certainly can't cook tonight? Whatever you need, I think you need those safe people to be able to reach out to them. And then, how did you and your husband find healing with all of this? And what steps did the two of you take?
Well, I wouldn't recommend you do it our way, but it worked for us. We definitely divorced, but we had very bad feelings towards each other. We both felt betrayed. The one that you're supposed to love more than anything in the world doesn't get you. And I can remember teasing my husband, and I'm like, "You really think I wake up in the morning and fly down here on my broom just to irritate you?" Trouble is, he didn't deny it. So I
That's a problem, Carol.
And even my mother looked at me and she said, "You never had a temper before. Now you respond in anger all of the time." So it does change you. But my husband and I needed to separate for a time and we needed help. And so I ended up going through a 12-step program and therapy. And I just think it's the best thing that ever happened to me in the whole world. Um, I ended up going to my Bible study class, and I was quite certain I was about to be ostracized. And I would have to tell them what I'd done, confess it, and they'd be like, "Oh boy, that you need to go get a grip." They laid hands on me, lifted me up, and I got to tell you, I didn't expect it, but they're like, "Your ministry is so much more authentic now because you've been through something." Now, I'm not telling you that, you need to be in the thick of it. You've got work to do. You've got work that you definitely must do, but there's hope and you can get to the other side. And my ministry has been way more effective because I've been there. I know the feelings. I can relate.
Yeah. So you went to a 12-step recovery program. Where did you go for that?
As a matter of fact, my church, there's
Okay.
two 12-step programs, and then there was a network of them in our area. So it didn't just stay at my church, but there were several of them. But there was a women's group that I was drawn to, and it really helped. And it was a good, strong, hard year of people going, "Look, here's how you speak truth. Here's how you don't sweep things under the rug. Here's how you realize you cannot control outcomes." It's just a whole different way of thinking when you're not just focusing, "Okay, I got to do the next thing to get through the day."
Yeah. Yeah. And then so you went for therapy. And then what about your husband? Did you go together to bring your marriage back together?
We had tried marriage counseling, and it I won't say that it didn't work, but we both were not in the same place at the same time for that. And so he told me, "You can continue on. I'm done now." I chose to continue on. So, but my husband was also doing work on his side too and overcoming his alcohol issues. And we came back together for quite some time. We did not talk. We basically had to cool off. My son, this is several years down the path. You have to let it go. I thought my marriage was done. You have to understand that. I moved through my family and through my ministry. They were all very gracious to me, but my identity was one. My son made some very bad decisions, and I'm like, "I'm going to have to tell my husband. I'm just going to use my ex at that time." And I said, "Can we get together? I've got to update you. You need to be aware of this." And we sat down at a table. We just cried. We just cried. There was still a bond that was there because we shared this child. And we had history together. We were married for 26 years.
Okay.
I grew up on the man, I'm telling you, and we began to be friends again and to tread forward together like we did before. And it was very, very redeeming because we remembered why we married in the first place, but then we were approaching our problem, not consider my son a problem, but his choices were. We did those together. And so we just continued to move forward as friends. Then my husband developed some health issues and he needed help. It involved a feeding tube. And so he stayed at my condo for 40 days. And Becky, it wasn't half bad. Neither one of us expected it. The community and the partnership that we had, it's a pretty good thing.
So you refell in love. So the beauty of that is that God sometimes gives beautiful second chances. And I know another couple that was divorced for 6 years, and then they each got individual counseling. They got back right with the Lord, and then they remarried each other. And there's something really beautiful about that because God never gives up on us. Now, so you and your husband get back together, um, and how did you help your son at that point?
At that point, we're still working on that part of our redemption because he's still challenged. And he came to visit. We both went and saw him. And my husband had a falling out, and we're still in the middle of that. So we've got a stage 2 to get through.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. So, as far as hope, maybe there are moms out there and maybe their teenager is really making a lot of impulsive decisions or, struggling so badly with, whether it's being on the spectrum or impulsivity or ADHD or all of the above. What would you say to give them hope, Carol?
God is not the author of evil. He is the God of redemption.
Yeah.
He has allowed you this situation for a reason, and you may not know what the situation is on this side of this earth, but He has chosen you to parent this child, whether you feel equipped or not. You don't know how it's going to end, but God does. And He has not left you alone. And you cannot control the outcome sometime. Your strength is not enough, but the strength of the Lord's is. And He will guide you. My story is not done yet. I just told you we're in the second stage of trying redemption with Him. Just don't give up. Cover your children with prayer. Have people pray for you so that you know the words to say, the guidance to say. You have to be comfortable with not knowing, but know that the story is not over.
Yeah. I mean, I always think I tell parents this, you know, God will never stop pursuing your child. No matter how far off course they've gone, He is more in love with your child even than you are. And so when our hearts are just bleeding and we feel like we can't take the next step, we can be reassured that God is still pursuing that child and He is still sovereign, and He can take the worst mess and turn it around. And I think what's beautiful, Carol, is that He took the mess that was your marriage and He turned that around. He took a Bible teacher who had become an alcoholic and helped her get sober and keep teaching the Bible. But there's such beauty to the authenticity of that. And I think as I've been listening to you, what I hope our mamas are getting is, first of all, you got to be authentic. If you're having a really hard time with your kiddo, tell somebody, open up, find those godly women that are around you who aren't going to judge you, but who are going to come around you and pray and be a support network for you, you know. And if you're tempted to numb your pain, tell somebody and instead make a different choice, right? And that's easier maybe said than done. You know, what would you say to the mama out there who realizes, okay, I'm not anesthetizing with alcohol, maybe she is, but maybe she's anesthetizing in another way. You know, maybe it's through Netflix or through social media or through shopping, you know, and she's just trying to numb the pain. What would you say?
You I can't just sit here and tell you to stop, because if you have never been controlled by a substance before, you cannot understand the addictive powers associated with it. How can an intelligent human being be controlled by a substance? If you haven't been there, you can't even describe it. That's one of the things. You need some help. But you're not the only one that's ever gone through it. That kind of thing is very, very isolating. And I got to tell you, when I went through my 12-step program, reaching out finally, there's so many more people like me that understand, but there's many different ways to get. It's a slippery slope, because I did not decide, hey, Becky, guess what? I think I'm going to be an alcoholic today.
Yep.
You know, I would not have picked that. I would not have done that. But it's so easy to do, to try to unplug, to just quit feeling the feelings. But self-awareness is key. You know if something's wrong. You know, and people understand it. You're not alone. That's the whole thing. You are just using the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think those words, and this is actually a pretty good place for us to end, Carol, is for you to know you are not alone. First of all, Jesus is the one who said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He will always be there. Second of all, if no matter what you're struggling with, I guarantee you there's someone else on the planet, probably in your neighborhood, maybe even one of your closest neighbors or friends at church, who's struggling with the same thing. So we may as well get real with each other and be authentic so that we can enjoy the community that God meant us to enjoy, so that we don't have to live these isolated lives, and so that we can find those who can come alongside of us and encourage us in our faith. And if you take those steps towards authenticity, chances are God's going to use you in someone else's life as well, just like Carol here, right? I mean, you're now reaching out to thousands of others who have needed to know that they're not alone.
Well, it becomes your ministry. That's the thing. You really do understand it. God has a purpose in all of your pain, and you can reach other people. Therefore, by me sharing my story here, hopefully somebody else who is feeling just as isolated, just as proud as I felt that they're going to power through, won't do that. I don't do it.
Okay, if our listeners say, you know what, I really need to talk to this woman because I'm there, I'm feeling alone, I'm having a glass of wine every night and I can't get to sleep without it, or I'm on the internet all the time, where can they get in touch with you, Carol?
My website is carolmccracken.com. I'm on the socials. Instagram is Carol Ogle McCracken. Click on, let's chat. We can be as private as you want to be. There is also, with our Faith Over Fear podcast, there is also a support group that's associated that. It's a private group on Facebook, and we have a lot of people coming in through that.
That is great. Well, friends, I hope that you are going to reach out to Carol if you're struggling. Listen, don't do the journey alone. That's the whole reason we chose this title, The Connected Mom Podcast, because you need to be connected to God. You need to be connected to friends and close other, mentors and people who are going to lead you closer to Christ. And you also need to be connected to your child. So don't do this journey alone. Take a lesson from Carol's beautiful story and reach out to somebody today. And maybe that somebody is actually Carol. And you can just say, hey, Carol, Carol, I would love you to pray for me. So thanks for joining us today on the Connected Mom podcast. And hey, we are headed into a special season of the Connected Mom podcast. We're going to try something new that we haven't tried before. We're going to do the book club season over the summer of the Connected Mom podcast. And we're going to be doing the book that I recently wrote called Cultivating Deeper Connections in a Lonely World. So gather some friends. You'll be able to listen to a podcast. The podcast is only going to be like 10 to 15 minutes long, but then you can have great conversations around that book and just enjoy your summer with your friends. So I hope you'll join us for that special season for the Connected Mom, and we'll see you then. Thank you, Carol, for being our guest today. This was incredible.
Thank you for having me. It was great.